A blizzard swallowed Pine Valley the night Officer Emily Carter disappeared. Her radio died mid-chase, lost somewhere beyond Frost Hollow Road. By morning, search teams found only shattered glass, a broken badge, and blood vanishing into the snow. 3 days later, a reclusive war veteran named Jack Turner stumbled upon a wounded German shepherd, exhausted, half-frozen, yet refusing to leave a trail in the drifts. When Jack followed the dog's desperate cries, he unearthed what the storm tried to bury: a woman barely alive, and a secret someone would kill to keep silent. What began as a rescue in a winter storm would unravel corruption, redemption, and the bond between a soldier, a broken officer, and a dog who never gave up. This is a story of faith, courage, and the quiet miracles that rise, even from the coldest snow. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from tonight? And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of hope, loyalty, and the miracles that walk beside us every day. Snow fell in waves, thick and relentless, swallowing the pine forest outside Pine Valley, Montana. The storm howled like a living thing, and through its roar came the faint whine of a police engine struggling against the drifts. Officer Emily Carter, 35, kept both hands on the wheel, eyes narrowed behind the windshield streaked with ice. Her lips were pale from the cold, but her jaw was set, the kind of tension that came from years of holding the world together by sheer will. Emily was tall and athletic, with the lean muscle of someone who trained more to quiet her mind than her body. Her auburn hair was tied tight beneath a navy cap, a few strands clinging to her damp cheek. Her face, though beautiful, bore the quiet fatigue of a woman who had seen too much, the sleepless nights of a cop who had spent too long chasing ghosts of other people's pain and her own. Beside her sat Shadow, a 6-year-old German shepherd with a sable coat dusted in snow and eyes the color of burnt amber. The dog's posture was alert, his body a coiled spring of discipline and instinct. Shadow had once been a military K-9 in Afghanistan, trained for detection and defense. He'd served with Emily since his discharge, and though he couldn't speak, his loyalty was an unbroken vow. Every breath between them was an understanding. If one fell, the other would not leave. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4, visual on the suspect vehicle near Frost Hollow Road," Emily said into the radio, voice steady despite the wind. The static swallowed her reply. She tried again. Nothing. The blizzard had devoured all frequencies. Ahead, faint brake lights blinked through the swirling white, a dark pickup, skidding across the ridge road. She recognized the plate number instantly. Lucas Hayes. Lucas Hayes, 40, was a man carved from betrayal. Once a federal operative, he'd turned traitor, selling intelligence to the same drug syndicates he'd sworn to dismantle. His file read like a ghost story. Operations gone wrong, agents dead, evidence lost. People said prison had changed him, that he'd come out colder, quieter. Emily didn't believe in redemption for men like him. She had lost her younger brother, Ryan, to an overdose traced back to the same cartel Hayes supplied. She never forgot the call that night, the voice that broke when it told her it was fentanyl. Since then, she'd sworn 2 things. She would never again freeze under fear, and she would never let men like Hayes vanish into the snow unpunished. The chase wound deeper into the mountains. Her tires slipped, branches clawed at the sides of the cruiser. Shadow growled low, catching the metallic scent of gun oil carried on the wind. "Stay with me, boy," she murmured. Her breath clouded in the freezing air. The truck ahead fishtailed and stopped suddenly. Headlights vanished. Silence. The kind that presses on your chest until even your heartbeat feels too loud. Emily stepped out, her boots sinking to her ankles. The forest loomed, black silhouettes against a white void. The wind cut through her uniform, but adrenaline burned hotter. Her flashlight beam swept across the truck. Door open, no driver. Tracks led toward the tree line. She signaled Shadow with a hand gesture. The dog moved forward, nose low, body close to the ground, professional, silent. Somewhere beyond the pines came a metallic click, the sound of safety off. She dropped to one knee. "Hayes," she called, voice swallowed by the storm. "It's over. Drop the weapon." The response came not in words, but in light. A muzzle flash, orange against the blue-white dark. The bullet whined past her ear, biting into bark. She fired back, 1, 2, controlled shots. Shadow lunged into the dark, barking, driving the shooter's aim off course. Then came the second shot. Closer, sharper. Pain exploded in her shoulder, spinning her halfway around. She stumbled, fell hard into the snow. The world tilted. Her breath came ragged. Shadow's snarl turned feral. He threw himself between her and the shadows moving through the trees. Shapes flitted behind the trunks. More than one man. Hayes had backup. She could barely see through the blood in her eyes, but she heard the chaos. The dog's furious growl, the crunch of boots, the thud of a body hitting ice. "Shadow!" she gasped, reaching out. The radio crackled uselessly by her hip. Snowflakes stung her skin like shards of glass. The pain in her shoulder pulsed with each heartbeat, spreading a dull fire down her arm. Somewhere in the darkness, Hayes laughed. Low, cruel. "You should have stayed out of it, Carter," he called. "Some things are meant to stay buried." Then another shot. She felt it like a hammer to the ribs. The world dimmed. The cold seeped through her bones. In her blurred vision, Shadow stood over her, fur matted with blood. His or someone else's, she couldn't tell. He barked once, defiant, then turned his head toward the distant glow of headlights on the highway far below. Her fingers brushed the metal badge pinned to her chest. Cracked, slick with blood. She pressed it to her heart as the snow began to cover her like a shroud. Her last thought was not of death, but of Shadow, that he would keep fighting, even when she could not. Wind howled over Frost Hollow Ridge, carrying the echo of a dog's desperate bark into the endless white. The blizzard had not yet broken. Snow swept across the Montana wilderness like a living veil, swallowing trees, tracks, and time itself. Beneath that relentless white, Jack Turner trudged forward through knee-deep drifts, his breath clouding in the frigid air. At 42, Jack was the kind of man the world no longer noticed. Broad-shouldered, rough-edged, his face half hidden behind a beard streaked with gray. Years of military service had carved him into something solid and quiet. Scars ran along his knuckles, and faint crow's feet framed eyes that had learned too much about loss. He had served as a special operations medic, patching up men who never made it home. After Afghanistan, after watching his younger brother die in an ambush he couldn't prevent, Jack walked away from everything. He settled in an old timber cabin miles from Pine Valley, where silence was easier to live with than people's pity. He trusted the woods. They never lied. That morning, as dawn struggled to push through the storm, he was out checking his snares when he noticed the blood. A thin, dark line cutting across the snow, too much for a wounded deer, too fresh to ignore. Instinct took over before reason could argue. He followed the trail, his boots crunching over frozen ground, the wind knifing across his face. The trail wound between pines until he saw movement ahead, a shape half buried beneath snow, trembling, alive. A German shepherd. The dog was large, powerful even in exhaustion, its sable coat clotted with blood and ice. Its eyes, amber, intelligent, fiercely alert, locked onto Jack as he approached. "Easy, boy," Jack murmured, lowering himself slowly. The shepherd growled weakly, protective even in pain. Then Jack saw the leash still attached, frayed where it had been torn. "You've been through hell," he whispered. When he reached out, the dog didn't bite, only pressed its head against his arm as though pleading. That small act of trust decided everything. Jack slid his arms beneath the animal's chest, feeling the rapid heartbeat under his palms, and noticed the faint drag marks extending deeper into the woods. The dog had been pulling something. Following the line of disturbed snow, he soon found it. What looked at first like another drift. Then the color registered, dark hair against white. He dropped to his knees. A woman lay there, half buried, her police uniform stiff with ice, her skin the waxy gray of someone nearly gone. Blood matted her shoulder. Her face was striking even in stillness, strong cheekbones, lips blue with cold, lashes crusted with frost. She looked mid-30s, the kind of beauty carved from endurance rather than ease. Her badge read, Carter. Jack's medic instincts came roaring back. He checked her pulse. Faint, but there. "Hang on," he muttered. The dog, Shadow he saw on the collar tag, whimpered low, hovering beside him. "You did good, Shadow. Let's finish the job." Lifting Emily Carter was like lifting a memory. She weighed almost nothing, the dead weight of someone caught between worlds. The trek back to his cabin was brutal, the wind howling like it wanted to tear them apart. Twice he stumbled, once he nearly fell, but the dog kept circling, barking encouragement, as though commanding him not to quit. By the time Jack reached his porch, his arms and back burned, and the storm had buried his tracks behind him. Inside the cabin's single room, the heat from the iron stove met the frozen air with a hiss. He laid Emily on his cot, stripping off the outer layers with clinical precision. Her shoulder wound had gone septic, the bullet grazing bone but missing the artery. "Lucky," he muttered. Luck or something else. He sterilized his knife over the flame, cleaned the wound with what antiseptic he had left, and stitched in silence. Shadow never left her side, his head resting on the edge of the bed, eyes tracking Jack's every move. When Jack tried to push the dog aside, it rumbled a warning deep in its throat. "I'm not your enemy," Jack said quietly, meeting those amber eyes. "If I wanted to hurt her, she'd already be gone." The dog blinked once, then looked away. Permission granted. Hours passed. The storm beat against the windows, wind screaming through the chimney. Jack's hands moved by memory, bandaging, warming, stabilizing. When it was done, he sat back, breathing hard, studying the woman he'd just saved. There was something about her, a discipline, even unconscious. Her fists were clenched as though she still held on to duty. On the table beside her, he noticed the torn pocket of her jacket and something glinting inside. A micro SD card, taped beneath the lining. Written on it, in neat smudged ink, were the words, "Trust the one the dog chooses." He frowned, turning the card over between calloused fingers. "What the hell did you walk into, Carter?" He looked at Shadow, who was licking her hand gently, his body finally relaxing. "You're the reason she's still breathing, aren't you?" he said softly. The dog's ear twitched in response. As night deepened, Jack fed logs to the stove, poured a measure of bourbon, and watched the snow drift higher against the windows. He told himself he'd get her to town once the roads cleared, hand her over to someone who could explain why a wounded cop and a half-dead K9 were bleeding in his woods. But part of him already knew he wouldn't let go that easily. After years of isolation, the sight of two lives fighting so fiercely to survive stirred something he thought long dead. Near midnight, Shadow suddenly lifted his head. Every muscle stiffened. He faced the door, ears pricked, growl low and rising. Jack froze, listening. Through the blizzard's roar came a faint mechanical hum, the grind of an engine somewhere beyond the tree line. Headlights flickered between the branches, distant but moving. A truck. Out here, at this hour. Jack reached for his rifle. "Whoever you're running from, Carter," he murmured. "They just found your scent." The storm swallowed the cabin again, but the light outside kept pulsing, closer now, like a heartbeat in the snow. The storm had quieted, but the silence it left behind felt heavier than the wind. Snow blanketed the forest in a pale stillness, broken only by the crackle of firewood inside Jack Turner's cabin. Emily Carter woke to the faint scent of smoke and antiseptic, her body aching as though every bone remembered the cold. Her breath came in sharp, uneven gasps. Pain radiated from her shoulder, and her hand trembled as she tried to move. For a long moment, she didn't know where she was. The world around her was strange. Rough wooden walls, a single lamp burning low, and the rhythmic hum of a storm fading in the distance. Then the memories came. The gunfire, the laughter in the dark, the snow swallowing her voice. She blinked hard, her vision clearing enough to see the figure seated nearby. Jack Turner, 42, sat at a worn oak table cleaning a rifle with slow, deliberate movements. His posture was that of a man who'd learned patience the hard way. He was tall, powerfully built, his beard rough and peppered with gray. The lines around his mouth and eyes were carved deep, reminders of years spent under sun, dust, and the shadow of war. There was something about him both steady and wounded, like a structure built to endure collapse. His blue-gray eyes flicked toward her, assessing, cautious. "You're awake," he said simply, voice low and roughened by disuse. Emily tried to speak, but her throat was raw. "Where am I?" "About 8 miles from Pine Valley. You were dying when I found you." He nodded toward the bed. "You and your dog." She turned her head slowly and saw Shadow lying near the stove, bandaged but alert, his coat glinting amber in the firelight. The German Shepherd was 6 years old, muscular yet lean, his eyes intelligent, never leaving her. Despite the injury on his flank, he thumped his tail once, as if to assure her that he was still on duty. "Good boy," she whispered, voice shaking. The sound seemed to ground her more than the painkillers or the warmth. Jack poured water into a tin cup and handed it to her. His movements were careful but distant, as though contact with another human being might reopen a wound he'd long tried to seal. "You've been out for 2 days," he said. "You'll live, but I wouldn't start running marathons." Emily forced a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. "That's not really my hobby." They fell into a strained silence, broken only by the pop of wood in the fire. Emily studied him through the haze of pain. He carried himself like a soldier even now, back straight, eyes never fully relaxed. There was a sadness in him, something unspoken. You were military, she said softly, half a question. Jack's gaze flicked toward the fire. Was, he answered. Now I'm nobody. She sensed the edge beneath the words, something brittle. She didn't press further, but her curiosity sparked. You didn't have to save me, she said after a moment. Why did you? Jack didn't look at her. Didn't seem right to leave you there. The dog wouldn't have allowed it anyway. Emily glanced at Shadow. The German shepherd lifted his head slightly, ears twitching, as if he understood. She reached for the edge of her torn jacket lying nearby. The movement sent a wave of pain through her shoulder, but she ignored it, fingers tracing the fabric. My radio was destroyed, she murmured. And my partner. Her voice cracked. She shut her eyes, swallowing hard. He didn't make it. Jack said nothing. He knew the sound of guilt when he heard it. It lived in his own bones. He'd once been married, once believed in normal things, coffee in the morning, laughter in another room, but the war had stolen his family. His wife and daughter were gone, lost in a roadside explosion during a deployment he was never supposed to be on. He'd returned home to nothing but silence and his own ghosts. Saving Emily had not been charity. It was reflex, maybe even punishment. As she drank the water, her fingers brushed against her jacket again, and she noticed something inside the inner pocket. A flash of metal. A small USB drive, no bigger than a thumbnail, taped beneath the lining. Her pulse quickened. She peeled it free and turned it over, noticing faint writing across the plastic. Trust the one the dog chooses. She frowned, confusion knitting her brow. What the hell is this? Jack looked up from his rifle. Found that when I stitched you up. Thought it might mean something to you. Emily's mind raced. She had vague flashes from before the ambush. Her team chasing a lead, a convoy gone dark, a name whispered over the radio. Miles. The realization clawed its way through the fog in her brain. This might be evidence. My old chief, Walter Miles. He's retired, but... She stopped, a chill creeping through her. He was investigating corruption inside the department before he left. He told me if anything ever happened, I should keep my trust small. Jack raised an eyebrow. You think your own people set you up? Emily's silence was answer enough. Her pulse hammered as she turned the USB over in her hand. Someone wanted us dead, she murmured. Before Jack could reply, Shadow suddenly lifted his head, ears stiff. The dog rose on shaky legs, nose twitching toward the window. His low growl vibrated in the air. Jack stiffened. He's got something, he said quietly, crossing the room and peering through the frost-covered glass. For a moment, there was only the darkness of the trees. Then, movement. A flicker of light. Truck, Jack muttered. 200 yards, maybe less. Emily's breath hitched. They found us. Jack grabbed his rifle and moved to the doorway, his voice low but steady. Stay down. If they're who I think they are, they'll come hard and fast. Shadow positioned himself between the bed and the door, hackles raised, teeth bared. Emily reached for the pistol Jack had left on the table. Her shoulder burned as she aimed it, but her hands were steady. The wind outside shifted, carrying faint crunches of footsteps through snow. A window shattered. Bullets ripped through the cabin walls, splinters flying. Jack dropped to one knee and returned fire, the blast echoing across the frozen valley. Shadow lunged toward the door as it burst open, colliding with the first intruder in a blur of fur and fury. Emily's world shrank to gunfire and the metallic tang of fear. She shot once, hitting a figure moving through the smoke. The man fell, his body slamming against the wall. When the chaos finally stilled, smoke coiled through the air, stinging their eyes. Jack crossed the room, kicking away the attacker's weapon. He crouched beside the body and froze. The badge on the dead man's vest gleamed under the flickering firelight. Pine Valley Police Department. Emily's stomach turned cold. "That's one of mine," she whispered. Jack looked at her, his expression grim. "Then whoever sent him wasn't planning to rescue you, Carter." Outside, the wind began to rise again, whistling through the shattered window like a whisper beneath the ice. Snow drifted down the slopes like silent ashes, veiling the world in ghostly white. The mountains north of Pine Valley had been abandoned for decades, an old mining settlement where wind whistled through broken shafts and time forgot to move. Beneath the rusted iron beams and frozen ground, Jack Turner led the way, his breath steaming in the frigid air. His beard had grown heavier with frost, and his movements, though careful, betrayed the quiet urgency of a man who had seen too many ambushes to trust stillness. Behind him, Officer Emily Carter stumbled slightly, her wound not yet fully healed. Her shoulder throbbed with every step, yet her face showed none of it. The pain had become part of her rhythm, folded into her resolve. Shadow, the German shepherd, trotted between them, alert, his ears twitching at the faintest echo from the cavern walls. His fur was streaked with snow, his gait uneven from an old injury, yet his eyes burned with focus. Emily glanced around the abandoned site. Collapsed shacks, half-buried mining carts, the faint outlines of human lives once built on greed and dust. It mirrored Pine Valley in ways she didn't want to admit, rotting under the weight of its own secrets. Her breath fogged as she whispered, "You sure this is where he said to meet?" Jack nodded, his tone flat. "Walter doesn't lie." Moments later, a voice drifted from the shadows. "Still punctual, Turner. Didn't think the Army broke that habit." From behind a rusted support beam stepped Chief Walter Miles, now 70, but still carrying the authority of his former badge. He was tall, but slightly stooped, wrapped in a wool coat lined with age and experience. His white beard framed a face marked by deep lines, each one carved by years of service and compromise. His eyes, steel gray and sharp, studied them both with quiet affection and regret. "Emily," he said softly, "you shouldn't have survived that ambush. God must have plans for you." Emily managed a faint, grim smile. "Or he's not done punishing me yet." Walter chuckled dryly, the sound rasping against the wind. "Still the same fire, even when half dead." He turned serious again. "You were right to come here. The storm isn't over, it's just hidden." Inside the mine's outer chamber, they huddled around a lantern Walter had lit. Its glow flickered over maps and files spread across an old wooden crate. "I've been digging into Hayes for months," Walter said, tapping the papers. "Lucas Hayes didn't just reappear out of nowhere. He's been protected." Emily frowned. "By who?" Walter met her gaze. "By people wearing the same badge you swore an oath to. The deputy chief's son, Hayes, is the face, but the money? It runs up the chain. The mayor himself has been laundering through construction contracts tied to cartel shipments. Pine Valley's clean image is a mask. Behind it is rot." The words sank in like ice. Emily's fingers tightened around her sleeve. "The mayor," she remembered shaking his hand at her promotion. the hollow warmth in his eyes. Her pulse pounded in her ears. "You have proof?" Walter slid a weathered envelope toward her. "Enough to wake the DEA, but they won't move until they can't deny it anymore, which means someone has to get this out of the valley alive." Jack studied the files, jaw tight. "Then we move at dawn. Too much open ground at night." Before Walter could respond, Shadow lifted his head suddenly, a low growl rumbling from his chest. The sound was primal, warning. Jack's instincts flared. "What is it, boy?" The dog padded toward a collapsed tunnel entrance, nose twitching. Then came a sound, a muffled whimper, small and human. Emily froze. "That's a child." They followed Shadow into the tunnel, ducking beneath hanging beams. The air grew colder, filled with the stale scent of fuel and fear. Behind a stack of crates, they found a cage crudely welded from pipes and wire. Inside, 3 children, no older than 10, wrapped in thin blankets, shivering. Their faces were pale, eyes hollow. Emily's stomach twisted. "Dear God." Walter's voice was heavy. "They've been using the mine to move product through the ridge. Kids run the drops. Less suspicion." Emily knelt beside the cage, brushing snow from the bars. The youngest girl flinched, but met her gaze. "Please," the girl whispered. "He said he'd come back tonight." "Who?" Emily asked. The answer came before the child could speak. A low rumble echoed through the tunnel, the sound of engines approaching. Jack cursed under his breath. "They're early." "Hide the kids," Walter ordered, his old command voice cutting through the panic. He handed Emily a pistol. "You're still wounded. Stay low. Shadow, guard." They took positions behind a mining cart as headlights cut through the entrance. 2 trucks screeched to a stop outside, men jumping down, rifles in hand. At the center of them stood Lucas Hayes, broad-shouldered, clean-shaven, his blonde hair slicked back beneath a black beanie. At 40, he carried the arrogant calm of a man convinced of his invincibility. His smirk was a wound that hadn't healed right. "I knew you'd crawl out of hiding eventually, Carter," he called into the dark. "You're good, but not good enough." Emily's heart pounded. Her hands trembled, but not from fear, anger. She whispered to Jack, "I take Hayes. You cover the kids." Jack nodded once. Gunfire shattered the night. Echoes bounced through the mine, mingling with shouts and the metallic scream of ricochets. Emily fired, the recoil biting into her shoulder, pain exploding but ignored. Shadow lunged from the shadows, tackling one of the gunmen. A shot cracked overhead, sparks raining down, smoke and dust filled the air. Then, an explosion of sound. A section of the tunnel ceiling gave way. Rocks tumbled, a roar of collapse. "One of Dumont," the children screamed. Shadow darted forward, teeth clamped on the child's jacket, dragging him free just as the ground gave way behind them. Emily caught sight of Hayes through the haze, his pistol raised, grin triumphant. She fired first. The bullet struck true. His expression froze in disbelief as he fell backward into the snow-dusted dark. Silence followed, broken only by the groan of settling stone. Jack moved to Emily's side. Her arm hung limp, blood seeping through the fresh wound. She swayed but stayed standing, eyes locked on where Hayes had fallen. Walter approached slowly, his face etched with sorrow and pride. "You did what needed doing," he said quietly. Emily exhaled shakily, the adrenaline fading, leaving only exhaustion and the echo of gunfire in her head. She glanced at Shadow, who lay panting beside the rescued child, his eyes half closed but still alert. We're not done yet, she whispered. Outside, the storm began again, erasing footprints and bodies alike, just as Pine Valley had always done with its ghosts. The sun rose pale and hesitant over Pine Valley, its light fractured by frost and drifting snow. Winter had not loosened its grip, yet for the first time in months, warmth lingered beneath its silence. The hospital overlooked the valley, a small white building pressed against the mountainside like a last refuge. Inside, Officer Emily Carter stirred awake. Her body ached with the memory of battle, stitches tugging across her shoulder, ribs bound tight, pain fading but never far. She opened her eyes to the rhythmic beep of a monitor, to the faint scent of antiseptic mixed with pine from the open window. It was morning, and she was alive. Jack Turner sat by her bed, his broad frame slouched in the visitor's chair, exhaustion carved deep into the lines of his weathered face. His dark hair was shot with gray now, his beard rough with days of restless vigil. A scar ran along his jaw, a remnant of wars fought overseas and at home alike. He looked like a man who had finally stopped running, yet didn't know what peace should feel like. When he noticed her waking, a smile broke through the fatigue. "You've been out 3 days," he said quietly. "You had us thinking you'd given up." Emily's voice came hoarse, cracked but steady. "You should know by now. I'm too stubborn for that." Her attempt at humor faltered when she saw the bandage on his arm. "You were hit." "Just a graze," Jack said, brushing it off. "You took the worst of it." Her gaze softened. Beneath the stoic tone, she could see the relief, the unspoken fear still clinging to him. For years, Jack had lived without attachments, scarred by the loss of his wife and son in a car bombing back in Kabul, collateral in a war that never truly ended. Emily had read his file once, before the storm, back when he was just a stranger in the snow. Now, she understood the quiet grief in every word he said. The door creaked open, and Shadow, the German shepherd, padded inside with a nurse trailing behind. His once mangled leg was wrapped but healing, his coat brushed clean, his proud ears perked the moment he saw Emily. He crossed the room in an instant, pressing his head against her hand. She smiled through tears she hadn't realized were coming. "Good boy," she whispered. "You found me when no one else could." Outside the window, snowflakes drifted like ash over the valley. The same valley that had taken lives and buried truths, but somehow returned hers. Days later, the town gathered at the old chapel for Chief Walter Miles's memorial. His casket, draped in the faded flag of his youth, stood before a wall of photographs. Years of service, of laughter, of weary eyes that had seen too much. Emily, still weak, stood at the podium. Her new uniform felt too heavy for her small frame. The silver badge on her chest caught the morning light. "Walter taught me that justice isn't about laws," she said, her voice breaking. "It's about courage, the kind that stands when everything else falls apart." Her eyes found the crowd. Officers, miners, shopkeepers, all bound by the same grief. "He once told me Pine Valley could still be saved. I didn't believe him then, but I do now." After the service, Emily walked alone to the cabin Walter had left her, perched high above the frozen lake, smoke curling from its chimney. The deed had been found in his belongings, along with a note. "For Emily and Jack, a place where the good still get a second chance." She stood at the threshold, letting the wind whip her hair, before stepping inside. The air smelled faintly of cedar and coffee, the stove still warm. Jack was already there, sleeves rolled, blueprint papers spread across the table. K9 Training Center, he said when she raised an eyebrow. Walter's land is big enough for it. Thought we'd make something out of this place. You mean stay? Emily asked softly. Jack looked at her, the way one looks at something fragile yet fierce. I've spent half my life tearing things down. Maybe it's time I built something worth keeping. They worked together over the following weeks, hammering wood, shoveling paths through snow, breathing life into the frozen valley. Shadow followed them everywhere, a guardian and a reminder of what had survived. Word spread, and soon returning veterans came to train rescue dogs, men and women haunted by the same ghosts, finding solace in the quiet discipline of loyalty. One evening, as twilight painted the sky violet and silver, Emily stood by the cabin porch. Her new uniform fit now, Pine Valley's new sheriff, as the town had unanimously voted. Jack emerged from the yard, dusted with sawdust, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. Shadow trotted behind, tail sweeping snow. Didn't think I'd ever salute a boss again, Jack said, mock serious. Emily smirked. Then don't. Just keep the coffee coming. A snowball hit him square in the chest before he could answer. Jack blinked, surprised, then laughed, a sound raw and rare. Oh, that's how it is? He scooped up a handful of snow in reply. Shadow barked, circling them, tail wagging, as the 2 humans played like children against the backdrop of endless white. When the laughter finally faded, Emily looked out over the valley. Quiet now, at peace. She thought of Walter's words, of the lives lost, of the strange, beautiful way redemption had found them all. In a world this cold, she murmured, maybe the warmest thing we have is a promise not to leave each other behind. Shadow barked once, sharp and sure, as if to agree. His paw prints dotted the snow, leading toward the horizon where sunlight began to break through the clouds. The storm was over, but their oath, like winter, would endure. Sometimes, miracles don't come with thunder or angels in the sky. They arrive quietly, in the breath of a wounded woman who refused to give up, in the loyalty of a German shepherd who would not leave her side, in a man who thought his faith was gone but still found light in the snow. When the storm ends, it's not the world that changes. It's us. We see that God's grace often wears ordinary faces, a friend who shows up when you need them most, a stranger who chooses kindness, a faithful animal who reminds us what love without condition looks like. Emily, Jack, and Shadow found theirs in the frozen silence of Pine Valley. Proof that even in the coldest season, God still plants warmth where hearts choose to hope. And maybe that's the miracle we all need. Not a rescue from the storm, but the strength to walk through it, together. If this story touched your heart, share it. Leave a comment about the miracles you've seen, the quiet ones, the everyday blessings that remind you you're never alone. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join our growing family of believers in hope, courage, and second chances. May God bless you, keep you warm in every winter, and remind you, as He did them, that no soul is ever truly lost when love still leads the way.